about draws and the transition game for the girls' game. I'm just working on pulling up her slides.
And I have a very needy dog off to my left who will be requiring petting while I'm talking.
Of
So
course.
if this arm is doing weird things, that's why.
Of course. All right, let me. It doesn't want to pull up, not computer. Oh, that is Keynote. Okay. Oh, okay. I'm going to try one more time.
Okay.
Right, this will work this time. Share.
Hey.
We'll put it in slideshow. There we are.
That.
All right, I will let you take it away, Anne.
All right. So just a little bit about me. I have about 25 years women's lacrosse coaching experience. I've coached everything literally from youth up into collegiate and internationally. I am, for the first time in a long time, I'm currently not coaching lacrosse right now. I instead am working with Minnesota United, the soccer club. I'm working with their academy players in a player care and operations kind of role. So this is has been fun to put this together and get back to a little bit of my coaching roots and my lacrosse roots for everybody tonight. So just tonight, KK asked me to talk a little bit about two really important parts of the game. And I think, getting down to the basics on both of them will be really critical for folks. So the first one we're going to talk about is transition and what does transition mean? Why is it important? How do you practice it? And then similarly with draw controls, why is it important? Ways to practice it, and also kind of defining for yourself and your group success both in transition and draw controls. So in the transition game, you got to kind of think about what does that mean to you. I think a lot of times coaches think about the transition game as really only being a midfield game. Kind of what happens between the 30s and you're transitioning the ball down into your offensive end or you're transitioning the ball out of your defensive end. And I think what's really, really critical is kind of ask these questions about, when is the transition happening? Where on the field is it happening? Which players are affected and what are the players doing? And for me, one of the big things that I think helped as I developed my coaching skills and my coaching philosophy throughout the years was, oftentimes you get a player on your team who is an attacker, right? She's an attacker. I play attack. And then you want to ask her, well, what happens when your team doesn't have the ball? What are you doing? And then similarly with defenders, right? I'm a defender. When your team has the ball, what is it that you're doing? It's not as if you aren't participating when one of those things isn't happening, depending on the position. And so talking about transition and where it happens has, for me, helped get those players who thought they were just attackers or just defenders to understand that they are everything, right? When your team has the ball, everybody's an attacker. When your team doesn't have the ball, everybody's a defender. And the transition game helps with that, because in reality, transition means transitioning from a point when your team has the ball to a point where your team doesn't have the ball and vice versa, right? And so it can happen at any time. You lose the ball, you cause it, you make a turnover, you have a shot that's saved, um, or you cause a turnover, the other team, takes a wild shot, ball goes out of bounds, right? And then boom, transition is happening right then. And it can happen anywhere on the field, right? So transition can happen in the midfield, and a lot of times, again, we talk about transitioning from offense to defense as if it were a midfield game, but in reality, it is an instant in the game that needs to be recognized and then acted upon. All players are affected, and probably the biggest thing that I think is helpful is recognizing both that all players are affected and that all players have a role once that change of ball possession happens. So you go from being a team that is on defense, your team doesn't have the ball, so what are the things that we do as a defensive team, to boom, almost immediately, what are we doing as a team that is offensive and we have the ball now and we're looking to go either possess the ball, score the ball, whatever that might be. And so kind of thinking of the transition game in this way, I think is really helpful. And I think that it can help your team to shorten the lag time between recognizing we're on offense or we're on defense. And that lag time is often the time when the other team takes advantage. And if you can be the team that takes advantage instead by saying, okay, we have the ball, boom, immediately. We're not going to let the other team adjust to being on defense. We're going to go at them right now. That really gives your team a benefit, as well as makes your team better defensively. If everybody can recognize very quickly, we're all on defense now because we've lost the ball. So, thoughts about transition. This is, I think, a very typical diagram of what happens after a shot. Okay, so here's your team. The other team, you're on defense here. The other team has taken a shot, and this is kind of where everybody is at that moment. Your goalie's got the ball now. And so if you look at this scenario, there's not a lot of space for the ball to go at this point. And so you put the ball in danger as you're transitioning from your defensive position into your offensive position. And so the next couple of slides we're going to go through are just going to give you a suggestion on how should the field look based on your player positioning when you are transitioning from defense into offense. Okay. And so what we do here, and I want to give some credit to a colleague of mine, Joanna Lignelli, who I've worked with US Lacrosse, doing some coaching education programming through them, who she and I worked together on this. And so I want to make sure that I'm not taking all the credit for these lanes and zones, but I think it can be really helpful to think of the field stretched out and widened into some lanes and some zones. And so that's what we've done here. And KK, you can put the next one up. And then, obviously we put the field now on there for some better spacing, and then colors, just in case you can't figure it out. So we've made the field into a bunch of different squares, right? And the key here, as you can see, is that you're trying to put your players in different squares in order to create space for the ball to move down the field. Again, right now we're talking about a defensive transition from defense into offense, trying to get the ball down to the left side of the page here to score a goal. And so if we can show our players that the best thing is for there to be no more than two players in any one square along the way, that's really going to help spread out the other team, make them require them to defend you kind of in all of those spaces. And then it's going to allow your team to have some space to move the ball from your defensive end into your offensive end. Now, you do see that in the zone Zone A, Lane 2, we do have a few more people, and that is because that is the very critical scoring area. You want to make sure that you've got some extra defense in that space, even if the ball is in the stick of one of your girls, because if you were to get a turnover in that area, you want a few extra defenders just to make sure you're safe. And if you take a look at the spacing of these players, what you'll notice is that when the ball is cleared by the goalkeeper to really any of the players on the field, they have sort of a 360 support system around them. So if let's say the ball gets cleared out to the midfielder that's in the top lane 1, zone B, that top midfielder, if the ball were to get cleared to her, she has got some support. She's got a support behind that defender. She's got a support to her left with that green midfielder. She's got a support ahead in the gray attacker, right? She's got some support pretty much all around her as she's looking to transition the ball up the field. So that's another really critical part of that transition from your offense, or excuse me, from your defensive end into your offensive end, is making sure that as the ball transfers down the field, it has support in all areas. So KK, I think there's one more. Yeah. Okay. So again, making it even more confusing by adding dotted lines and things. You're seeing sort of the pass direction. Yep. So the clear goes out to Dara, the defender. And what's happening is that all of the other players on the field are moving. Okay. They're changing their boxes. All right. And the reason that they need to do that is because if you are just standing still in your box, it's really easy for the other team to defend you and deny a transition pass. And so what we've shown here with these arrows, and keep in mind that the arrows aren't the only cuts that are available. There could be other cuts that you could do. This is an option for where the cutters would go once the ball gets transitioned out, right? And then the green is showing where the passes will go as the ball transitions out. Okay, and so we've got the ball and the people. Oh, we got to go back. Sorry. And so it's just, again, it's just a suggestion, but if you can keep the simple concepts of, one player per box and the ball carrier and the ball itself having sort of a 360 support around them, that those are some just big points to keep in mind when you're doing your transition. I think one kind of fun way, if you have the option, if you've got some hula hoops in your coach's collection box, if you could just put a hula hoop on the field where all of those boxes would be on the page there. And if you've got little ones and you're saying, okay, we're all going to start in the middle, right at the top of the 12, and on the whistle, I want everybody to run and find their own hula hoop, right? So that's just a great kind of fun way. It's conditioning, but it's a fun way to help them understand that they need to spread out around the field. So that's just kind of like one really simple, fun way to kind of practice that idea. You could create boxes with cones and pennies and those types of things too, but so for whatever reason, hula hoop sounds fun to me. So that's the one that I suggest for that. Okay, and then when you're thinking about the defensive side of a transition, right? So your team has now lost the ball. It's a little bit different than what we just did with the team gaining the ball. Now your team has lost the ball. Again, it can be really anywhere on the field. It might be in your offensive zone. It might be in your defensive zone, anywhere in the midfield. But you have to kind of start thinking, what am I telling my players? What should their initial reaction be the minute our team doesn't have the ball? What's that transition into defense mindset going to be at this point, right? And you have a lot of different options, and it really depends on what the personnel of your team looks like, right? So if you've got a very fast team, You might think about in a transition situation, being able to play sort of player to player, man to man, and marking up right away, just person to person, right? If maybe the other team has tended to sort of fast break you when they transition, maybe you send a few more people back to the top of the 12 right away and you don't worry about midfield transition defense. Um, and so you kind of have to figure that out person to person. Maybe you want to be even more aggressive and as soon as the ball turns over, you always want to double team on the ball, no matter where that is on the field, right? So those are the concepts and the ideas that you can have, and you just have to kind of think about how does that work based on who's on your team, the mentalities on your team, and the skills that are on your team. Um, as you're transitioning then back into your defensive end and within the restraining line, then you have to really start thinking about making sure somebody's picked up the ball. That's the most critical thing to do in transition defensively, is to know where the ball is and slow down the ball or stop the ball. Picking up additional players as they come into the restraining line and into the 12 meter and the 8 meter. That's kind of the next most important thing after finding the ball and knowing where the ball is. And then if you can keep your team from getting to playing too much of a player down, slow it down enough so that the rest of your team can get into the defensive end, and that you're playing even numbers is really a critical thing. You want to, you're going to benefit your team the most if in transition if in defensive transition, you can play as much as you can, even as opposed to player down in your transition. Well, hello there. All right, so this is again just one example of how you, as the ball transitions down, you may want to force the ball to go. Sorry, you're going to slow the ball carrier down with this player X right on the goalkeeper, and she's going to sort of hopefully pressure the goalie to not be able to get a great clear out. And then the rest of your team kind of drops back into the defensive end, and somewhat is allowing the goalie to have the low passes down in that sort of lane one, zone one area, but really packing in down in the blue team's, X team's defensive end, really packing in the defenders there, in order to make sure, like I said before, that you've got the best numbers to defend as the ball comes down the field. And I'll say it again, these are suggestions. They are not the only way to do it. It's just one way to think about doing it. Okay, so I've got a ton of drills here that are good for practicing the break. I think the biggest thing is to help your players do transition as quickly as possible, right? So there's not time to be mad because I dropped the ball and got a turnover, or I missed the cage and got a turnover, right? We don't have time for our players to sort of, put their heads down or, put their stick and be angry about things. They've got to, as soon as we're aware of a change in possession, we've got to change our attitude, change our mindset, and get ourselves ready to play whatever it is, offense or defense. So, and then just this kind of tip here, instead of just ending a drill or something with a goalie save, put the clear in, right? So the goalie makes the save, great, but let's play it out to the 30 now, and how are we redefending, and how are we working to clear the ball out. It's a little bit more game-like, so if you have the time to do it, it can be really helpful in the practice of it. So KK, if you just want to sort of throw a couple of these up, I don't know that I'm necessarily going to walk us through each and every one of these drills. I think it's more important that you have a copy of them, and
Okay.
I'm happy to have you share this with any of the attendees who'd be interested in looking at it.
Okay.
And so, again, I don't necessarily think we want to walk through them all, but the idea here is, you're turning up the field to move the ball up the field. And I can go back to the basics of basics, which is none of these drills do you any good if you can't catch and throw, right? And so making sure that your stick skills, your passing and catching, and your stick skills are solid, because a lot of this stuff really depends on your team being able to do those things well. This is a fun transition keep away game. This one I know my players have always enjoyed. You split your group into 3 teams, 3 even teams, and then they're playing a keep away game in zone 1. Zone 2 is kind of no man's land. So let's say the blue team over here has the ball. They're playing keep away until the red team turns it over. Once the red team comes up with the ball, they're going to head towards zone 3. Halfway through zone 2, the blue team should be riding or redefending, trying to cause a turnover. If the blue team were to get the ball turned over, that in their half of zone 2, they would go back to zone 1 and continue the keep away. If the red team were able to take it over that half field line, they're going to go into zone 3. They're going to be playing keep away against the green team. Same thing would happen if the green team were able to cause a turnover against the red team. They would redefend until half point in the zone, and then the green team would take it over into and be playing against the blue team at that point. So, this is a fun game. It's a real competitive game. You get a ton of touches on the ball. It's depending on how big you make the zones, you get some good conditioning in there. But it's also just a really nice way to require the players to quickly change their mindset, right? I've got the ball. Oh no, I don't have the ball anymore. Now I have to change my mindset. I'm on defense. That's the kind of thing. So this is a good one. So I just talked about it before we needed to. So all, again, recovery games, games that cause you to change your mindset quickly, are the ones that we're including here in our examples. Best game ever, also a very popular game with a lot of different people. You can make a lot of modifications to best game ever, and it just allows your players a lot of opportunities to think about their transition. And I think if you'll notice in that first progression, no sticks, and depending on the talent level, I just mentioned stick skills are really important. But if you are trying to get the theory or concept about, getting back in on defense or getting ahead of the ball and attack, and you're struggling to just catch the ball, sometimes just leaving the ball out of the drill for a few minutes and getting them into understand the concept of getting ahead of the ball or transitioning, they at least then can get the concept as you continue to work on your stick skills throughout. So, and then this crisscross, this is a pretty easy transition one, and you can make it really competitive. And again, it's a lot of touches on the ball. So I don't think we necessarily need to spend a whole lot of time just talking about it. So hold on, I've got a dog who is being obnoxious here. Hold on, I'm going to mute myself real quick and yell at him. So hold on.
No, you're good. She's got a puppy. What did Moose do upstairs?
Thank you. Okay, sorry.
Oh, yeah. I know how it goes. Mine did something naughty upstairs. I heard him get yelled at.
He's at the back door thinking he wants to go outside. He forgets that it's 12 degrees
That
out
it's,
right now.
yes, yeah, with a 20 below zero wind chill.
Yeah. So draw. We'll move on. We'll move on to the draw control. And I think draw control is really important. It is definitely, if you look at statistics at the end of games, generally speaking, the team that wins the most draw controls is the team that wins the game, right? Because possession of the ball is really critical. Excuse me. And so it is something that you need to practice. It also happens to be one of those things that I tend to find that most kids want to be a part of. Like they want to take the draw. They think that's going to be really fun. And so, especially if you've got a younger team, giving a lot of different people the opportunity to take the draw will be helpful. Not only because you get to include everybody, but then because you get to kind of see who is good at it. And really the critical skills for being a good draw taker are quick response times. So, if you've ever played that little game where you have your hands like this, and then the person standing across from you has her hands on top, and you practice that little slappy game, right? The kids that win that slappy game, those will often be the kids that are good at the draw because they have those quick reaction times, or the kid that can pull her hands away real quick. Because it's those reaction times, because when you're taking the draw, it's your response to the whistle being blown and the official dropping their arm. And so you want to find the kids that are quick. You want to find the kids that have some good wrist strength and just kind of general strength. If you get a tall kid, that's ideal. But even if there's the kind of the shorter ones in the group, sometimes because of the way that the officials are required to place the draw in terms of height between the two players, sometimes if you put a really small kid against a really tall kid, it really disadvantages the tall kid because she's not used to having to bend down so much to take the draw. So there's all sorts of different strategies behind who you put at the draw. But in the end, and I'm not trying to say that you shouldn't practice taking the actual draw, right? So the person with the stick and the drawing and all that. But really, in the end, it's the person who comes up with the ball that wins the draw. And that isn't always the person who is taking the draw. So you want to make sure that your players understand that even if someone at the middle who's doing the draw in the middle of the circle isn't herself coming up with the ball, your team can still win the draw, right? And so there should be as much practice, probably more practice, placed on what are our players who are outside the circle doing? What are they practicing once the draw is taken? And so, it's equally as important, I guess is what I should say, right? You want to have somebody who can do that quick wrist strength, who can place the ball in a certain direction, who is strong, can box out the other draw control person in the middle of the circle. And I didn't put very many drills in here for draws because what you really want to do is go on Google or YouTube and YouTube draw controls. And there are a bunch of really great female, Dana Dobie is one who stands out to me, who's got a bunch of great videos on taking the draw. And they can really sort of show you better than I could have in a slide how to take the draw and what it should look like. So I would just encourage folks to do that if they want to see and have somebody take them step by step through how to take the draw. There's the rules about your first motion has to be up. It can't be back. Your feet have to do certain things. Your hands have to do certain things, and so I would definitely just encourage folks to take a look at some videos online in terms of that part of it. But I do have one kind of I think it's a good drill here, and it's nothing big, but it's ground balls and high balls in the center circle, and you split your group into two teams. And the coach, you can either have the coach in the middle, you can have the coach standing on the outside. They toss the ball high into the air, and it's a 2v2 or a 1v1, or you could even add more players and have it be a 3v3, who are heading into the center circle to recover the ball as if it has just been taken, the draw has been taken. And so, having our players understand about boxing out when they're trying to pick up a ground ball. Ground balls in the Hunger Games are really, really critical. And so understanding that part of it is pretty important. And then you can move it from just collecting the ball, right, getting the best ground ball, boxing somebody out, to, okay, now we have to transition the ball from where I've picked it up in the center circle and make two passes out to someone on my team who's outside the center circle. Then we can defend it as the other team has gotten the ball and they're trying to get the ball out to two passes from the center circle. So, it's really one of those games and drills that you can build upon. You could almost do it for an entire practice. And I'll say something, I'm going to do another session next month about kind of practice planning and building a session. But, the fewer sort of venue changes on your field you have to do, and the fewer changes of, like, I've got to move the cones here now, and we have to move as a team from the 12 to the center circle to the 12 again. The fewer changes you have to make as you're doing your practice, the easier it is for your practice, the faster you can get through it if you're short on the amount of time that you have on the field. So this is one of those drills where you can have enough variety in it that you could literally be doing the same thing for an hour, and practice a whole bunch of different things, and hopefully the kids don't get too bored getting through all of that stuff. So
I think one thing on this drill is like paying attention as the coach to who's really good at this drill, and then having those be your circle people. So they may not be like the best at actually taking the draw, but if they can come up with it when it hits the ground, like they are good at boxing out, they've got the reaction, all of those things, they tend to make the better circle people. So as you're getting into like the 12U and the 14U, where they're specializing a little bit more, I think at like 10U, everybody should be, there's not a draw circle at 10U, but they're still taking the draw. But I think that once they get up into those areas, this is a great drill to figure out who should be those people up on the circle too.
Yeah. And I think, KK, you make a good point, right? As players start to specialize as they get a little bit older, maybe you do have someone who is really great at digging through those ground balls, boxing out, she gets down, but she's not very fast. So you wouldn't necessarily want to keep her as a midfielder. You switch her in there, for the draw. She comes up with the ball, she passes it off to someone who's a little bit faster, and then maybe there's a switch somewhere. She goes back behind into the defensive end or into the offensive end. But that's pretty high key strategy there. So that's going to take a lot. Above. Yeah.
But you never know where some of these 14Us are at.
Well, that is very, very true. So I hope that was enough information and not too much information. Somewhere hopefully in between. I'm definitely always open to hearing people's questions, either about the drills or the things that we talked about, or they're like, I can't believe you didn't talk about this when you talked about transition. How did you miss this when you talked about transition? I'm happy to answer those questions as well.
Yeah, awesome. And I can link to some of those, or I will link on our website to some of those Dana Dobie videos. So people can find them a little easier.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that like we forget sometimes that like YouTube is a wealth of knowledge. And again, like I totally agree with you that like you just standing here talking about it is not going to get them nearly as far as watching somebody do it, especially somebody that's new to the draw. Like you need to see it. And being able to see it on video is at least better. I mean, in person is the best, but video is second best there. So
Yeah, me trying to describe it right now, very bottom of the list of best things.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and then I know you talked a little bit about the next session that you're going to run. So that is March 26th, I believe is the date. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
So Ian will be talking about managing a team. Anything else you want to add about that one?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, awesome.
It should be it's a fun one because every year, every season, you have a new team, and so you always have to take that into consideration. So that's my
Yeah,
little teaser.
yeah, and tweak based on your personnel, right?
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Anne. I will stop this recording if I can figure out where my tab is. All right.